How's it going, guys? My name is Taki, and this video actually came from a viewer suggestion to make a video on UIs. Today I'm going to teach you how to make a functional UI for combat, a clean UI for skilling, and a nice small AFK UI for people with only one monitor or limited free screen space. Hello everyone, my name is Taki, and if you want to be the first to be notified about PvM, skilling, or quest guides that I put out, make sure to click the bell icon. Alright, to get started, we're going to need to press escape, and then we're going to load up the RS3 default layout. And after you do that, you're going to click on Edit Layout Mode. In this new window, you're going to click on Advanced Options, and you can go ahead and uncheck the buff bars and the other things that I click on right now. Don't worry, we're going to come back to this a bunch of times. Right now, we're only concerned with game view. Put a check in that, and then you're going to need to move the interface that's in the top right-hand corner of your screen out of the way so we can adjust the size of this window. So just minimize that a little bit, and then drag the interface over to the left so it matches that screen you just moved. After this, we're going to need to go to the bottom, and we want to raise that up a little bit. Just eyeball it. We're going to come back to this and fine-tune it later, but we just need to get a rough estimate of where it will be. So just drag it up a little bit, and then you're going to click Save and Exit. And then click Save again. And now we have a blank slate to work with to customize this UI. At this point, we want to move our map over to the top right-hand corner, so just move that interface down a little bit. We want to get a nice 3x4 for this. Again, it doesn't really matter if it's perfect. Just match it to the size of the game view that you just moved, and then just get it into a nice little box. After you like the arrangement of the map, you're going to take the interface with the skilling tab, and you're going to snap it to the map. Then you can go ahead and drag out the three interfaces that are there if you have them off to the side. We're not going to use those for now. Now we're going to work on fine-tuning that interface we just moved, and we're going to put a few things inside that space. The first thing is going to be the group chat list, so you can mouse over your ribbon at the top of your screen, go all the way down, click on that, and then you're going to want to drag that window that pops up all the way over to your skill tab. There's going to be two more windows that we're going to want to put here. The next one is going to be the friends chat. So we're going to go over here, and you want to go to friends chat list, click on that, and drag that over. Then we're going to go down to clan chat list. These are interfaces that you don't need to use too often, but when you do need to use them, you don't want them to be blocking anything else in your screen. So this is going to be our situational area that's primarily just going to be displaying our stats, but can occasionally flip to these other UIs. Now we're going to tackle the summoning interface, and the best way to do this if you don't already have a pet is to right click on the summoning icon on your bar, and then you're going to go over to open pet interface, and then you're going to summon any pet that you have. It doesn't really matter which one. You're just going to call the pet. Then you can go ahead and close this interface, and now if you right click over the summoning icon, you're going to want to go down to follower details. Take this window and you're going to want to put it in that space underneath our skill tab. We're going to do a little bit more work in this space, so you're going to first need to go and drag down the backpack so we can give more space to the summoning icon, and then you're going to want to go and drag out the tab for the emotes, and you're going to put that in the summoning familiar tab. After this, it's time to shrink the backpack again. Try to match it to the game view roughly, and then you're going to want to extend the follower details to match the height of the backpack. And that should be about where it needs to be, but we're going to fine tune this a little bit later. But that screen is pretty much good to go. The next thing that we're going to do is shrink the chat window, and you want to match that again with the game view. We can customize this a little bit later, but for now that should be pretty good. After you're done with this, you can go ahead and close the interfaces that are in the top of your screen, except for the prayer window. You can just drag that off to the side. We're going to be using that in a second. This next part is a little bit finicky. The idea here is that you want to have your ability bar that I'm moving right now be at the center of your screen. If you zoom in, the center of your screen for the game view would be exactly where the character is, but that's not going to be exactly where the center of your monitor is. So you need to find out where the center of your monitor is, and you want to get the 7 and 8 abilities on your bar to be about where the center of your screen is. For now, you can just eyeball that. We're going to go into our settings, and we're going to change a couple of options that you probably don't already have enabled. So go into settings, then go into gameplay, and you're going to want to go down to UI customization. You want to make sure that you have slim headers on. If you have this off, you can see that this is going to ruin our layout by making everything too big. So we're going to click that, make sure that's enabled. You also want to hide the title bars when locked, and I can show you what that will look like right now. With that unchecked, we have a nice little blue border, and it doesn't look too bad, but it will break a couple of things for this UI, so we want to make sure that's off so we have more space available to us. The next thing that we have to worry about is the transparency of our UI, and we want to make sure this is all the way over to the left so things are not transparent. If we move it all the way to the right, things will start getting black, and it makes it more difficult to see things because our game view is not taking up the entire screen. So make sure that's all the way over to the left. In your optional interfaces, you want to make sure that you have task complete pop-ups checked. You probably already have this. XP pop-ups can also be on, and make X window progress should be on. Your Slayer counter, you definitely want that to be on, and for now you can just put it on top right. We're going to customize that later. You can just drag that off to the side. We're going to put that in a different place after we're done with a few more things. The only thing else that's important in this screen is to make sure you have the full game clock on. This has a lot of use and functionality, so you definitely want to make sure that's on full background, and you can think about toggling the favorite clock and the show reset timers on the game clock, but it's not needed. This next part is absolutely crucial to this layout that I'm going to show you. You need to make sure that your dynamic backpack columns is set to 7. With that set to 7, you will never have more than 7 columns no matter how you extend the bar, but if you shrink it, you'll have less than 7. But this is important for the design that I'm going to be showing you. So for now, make sure that's at 7, and then we can progress. The next most important thing in this UI is to enable 3 additional action bars. Using my account as an example, I have action bars 1, 2, and 3 set up for the 3 main combat styles, so I'm going to be using bars 4, 5, and 6 as my additional action bars. So the first thing to do is go over to additional action bar 1, and then you're going to enable that for bar 4. Then you're going to go to bar 2 and set that as bar 5, and then go to bar 3 and enable that for bar 6. Once you have all of your action bars, you're going to want to make sure that they are in a straight line like you can see on screen right now for my bar 4 and 5. This will make it so that way all of the bars can stack underneath each other and you can have a perfectly sized layout. So you can just take this and drag it out. The best way to do this is just to go next to the gear icon or in the front, and then you can just line them all up like you can see on screen. There's one other way to set this up. If you have 4 additional action bars, you can set these up as rectangles and stack them on top of each other, and then put your main action bar on top of all of these, and that will still work, but I don't really ever use 4 additional action bars, so you can just disable that and go back to the other setting. But I wanted to show you this just in case you want to upgrade in the future. Now this is the point where you actually have to find the center of your monitor. Once you find it, just drag your 4 bars so that way they are perfectly centered with your screen. It won't be centered with your game view, but it will be centered with your monitor, which is the most important thing because you can control everything else. Once you're done with that, drag out your equipment window and shrink that so it can fit to the space to the left of your action bars. The most important and crucial thing for this is to make sure you do not have a scroll bar for this. You want to make it so that way you can see everything at a glance. And this is going to require you to shrink your chat window a little bit. So go ahead and shrink that over to the left so you have more space for your equipment window. Your goal here is to get it flush with your action bars. So you're going to need to make it a little bit longer. So keep moving your chat window until you do not see any scroll bar at all. When you feel comfortable with that, go ahead and shrink your chat window to match everything else. And at this point, we're almost done with this UI. The next thing is going to be up to personal preference. The first thing that we're going to want to do is to drag out our backpack. And if we match that to the height of your action bars, it will look like it has a scroll bar, but when you lock your interface, which you should always be doing, it will not have a scroll bar of any kind. The space to the right of the backpack is going to be reserved for all of our abilities. So you can go ahead and drag the open prayer inventory screen that you still have and drag that into the bar. And then you can go into the ability ribbon and get out your ranged abilities and your defensive abilities and drag both of those over into that ability tab that you already have going in the right-hand corner of your screen. Once your ability tab interface is set the way you like it, you have 2 different options for this. You can put your backpack all the way to the right-hand corner and put the ability window in the corner to the left, or you can switch them. But I happen to prefer having the backpack inventory to the right of my ability bar so that way it's easier to click on weapon switches or food or any items that I need to. The last thing that you need to do is just extend your familiar window all the way down, and then you're ready to go back into the edit layout mode. So click that, then go into advanced options. And then we're going to go down to game view, Click on that, and we're going to extend that to match the height of everything else. And now that one is perfectly set, so we can uncheck that box. Next thing that we're going to want to do is to set up our buff and debuff bars, and you want those to be right above your ability bar. And this is up to personal preference. I happen to prefer having my buffs to the left and my debuffs to the right. So you can set that up now, and then you can uncheck those. You can go ahead and move the minigame HUD down a little bit, and then we're going to go and change some more options. I'm going to uncheck that now. It's a really good idea to move your XP pop-ups window over to the right for a few reasons and a few PvM situations that aren't ideal to have this where it is right now. So you can just go ahead and click on that and just drag it over to the right, and you can just find a place that you feel comfortable with. I happen to like it right over here next to the map or next to the skilling tab. You can just pick whichever one you want. After that, you want to go ahead and move your ribbon all the way to the left-hand corner of your screen and shrink it so that way it's just one row of icons, and then you're good to go with that one. Make sure crafting window progress is where it is, and then you can uncheck that one. For your clock, the best place to put the clock I've found is right above your chat window, and you can just put it right there and it'll be perfectly fine. Then you can uncheck that. We also want to make sure our Slayer counter is in that same location, so you can just go ahead and drag that down next to your clock. It might look a little bit weird. Don't worry about it. We'll come back to this in another part of this video. Now from the top, you want to make sure everything is exactly centered. So just go and check stuff. You don't want something to be messed up and then have to go back and fix it later. A really good place for the boss timer is all the way next to your chat window on the right side. So just pop that and it'll be cleanly visible when you're doing a PvM encounter. After this, you're in the home stretch. You just need to make sure everything is perfectly centered. Make sure now that everything is perfect so you never have to go and fiddle around with this again in the future. A really good spot for the day planner is just below the ribbon, although you probably never use this. The dungeoneering window, a really good spot for that is in the bottom right-hand corner. And then you can uncheck that. Extra action bar, just move that up so it's not blocked by anything. Game dialogue is crucial. Make sure that's above your buff bars. So just drag that up a little bit and then you'd be fine with that. Graves aren't really relevant anymore, but you also want to make sure that these aren't blocked by any interface. Loot window is up to personal preference. I like to just have it over to the side so that way I can see it at a glance when I'm doing PvM encounters. Just make sure everything else is centered. You're almost done now. Okay, this is the most crucial part of all of this. You're going to want to go to save and exit, then save. But it's not really saved right now, so you have one more step to do. So you're going to go to settings. We're going to fix that Slayer icon. So you're going to go over to optional interfaces, go down to Slayer, and then just customize this the way that you want it to look, either the top left or the bottom left. I happen to just like the bottom left, so we're just going to go with the bottom left, but you can do the bottom right if you want to. And congratulations, at this point you have a fully functional UI. The only step to do now is to press the lock button so that way your backpack isn't screwed up, and you should have a very, very nice UI for doing PvM of any kind with some options to upgrade in the future if you end up adding some additional action bars. Before you go, make sure you click on Edit Layout Mode, then you're going to go to Save Layout Mode, and you can save this to My Custom 1, then click Save, then OK, and then save and exit again, and then save, and now you're perfectly set. You can load another UI and then go back to your My Custom 1 and everything will be perfectly fine. This next layout you have a ton of options for, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some trade-offs that you can make to get a really clean skilling UI, but the purpose of this is going to be just for skilling and not a lot of chatting. So we're just going to go ahead and set up the screen to look like it is now. Again, if you followed the other section, you pretty much know how to set up everything that you can see on screen right now. Most important thing is to make sure that you don't have a cluttered screen. Now there is a big compromise that you have to make for this UI layout. If you happen to have followed my previous layout to the T, you're going to have 3 additional action bars that are a little bit of a pain to deal with as they take up a pretty good amount of your screen space. But I'm going to show you why it is that I have them set up like this and why you'd probably want the same thing. So first, let's quickly go and save this as a layout. I'm going to save this as My Custom 2, and then I'm going to click Save, and then save and exit. And now I'm going to show you what this would look like. So if I went into settings and I disabled those additional action bars, I'm going to do that right now. Then I'm going to move my ribbon window up to the top. You can see this is much cleaner, but there's a downside to this. So now I'm going to load up my combat. Say I want to do some PvM. So let's load my custom one. Look, I'm missing all of those additional action bars, so I would have to go and manually change that. And I like to change these UIs on the fly, so I don't like to deal with doing that, so I leave these types of things enabled even though it doesn't make the UI as clean as it could be. But you can make that decision yourself. There's a lot of room for personal preference in this, especially if you have access to those additional bars on the right side of your screen. You could minimize the screen if you want to, but I happen to prefer seeing it so I can watch global cooldowns if I'm doing some skilling that uses an ability. Right now, let's focus on the ribbon specifically. If you click on the ribbon, your ribbon is probably in the way that you can see right here, but it's not really functional for us. So we're going to click on that little square with the pen, and then we're going to go into the customization screen, and we want to make sure we have our backpack, our book, our equipment window, prayer abilities, and our skills. Again, our primary purpose for this UI is skilling, so these should cover pretty much anything that you would be doing skilling-wise that you'd need access to at a glance. After you've got the ribbon how you want it, you should be able to get your inventory screens to go underneath the ribbon like you can see on screen right now. If I click on my backpack, the backpack goes right underneath it. And similarly with anything else, all of the other inventory screens and interfaces will open up in that new space right below this ribbon, making it collapse onto itself. You can open them all up or you can close them. You don't have to click on these if you don't want to. You can also use your keybinds, but the whole purpose of this is to make a collapsible screen so that way you can have a clean UI when you want to have a clean UI. Now, if I'm being completely honest with you, the times that I would use this interface would be times that I know that I'm not going to be chatting with anybody at all. And if I am chatting, it'd probably just be a friend's chat that I'm monitoring some kind of D&D or in-game activity. So when I'm using this layout in particular, I don't have any of the chat windows enabled at all. So you can go ahead and close out of all of those completely and just move your action bar to the bottom to have an even cleaner layout. The last thing to do is to go into the advanced options and make sure that this is set up correctly in the same way that you set up your combat one. Even though this isn't meant for PvM, I do like to set up everything the exact same way just in case I happen to have this loaded up and the opportunity arises that I am ready to go. And here's the finished product for my clean skilling UI with all of the interfaces minimized. This last UI is actually the one that I use the most, and that's the AFK UI. This is great for anybody that only has one monitor, as you can make your game as functional as possible by taking up the least amount of screen real estate space. There are two different ways that you can do this, and I'm only going to show you one of them. You want to think of your screen in 4 different sections if you only have one monitor. You can set up a UI that takes up half of the screen, so that way you have the other half to watch a video or do something else. Or you can do a UI that takes up only 1/4 of the screen, and you could do 2 of those to be able to dual client while still being able to do something like watching a video on the left side of your screen. And that's what I'm going to be showing you right now. The first thing we want to do is get a blank slate, so we're going to load up the RS3 default, and this is going to be perfect for us just getting started out. So we'll just load this up. This next part is going to take a little bit of trial and error, so essentially what you're going to want to do is to try to get your window as small as possible. It'll essentially take up about 25% of your screen, but a little bit bigger than that, maybe 28. Move it all the way to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and make sure that it takes up half of your monitor. Don't worry about messing this up. You're going to fine-tune this in the next section. You want to make sure that you don't make it so that way the screen itself has any scroll bars, as that means you've done something really wrong. So just try to eyeball it a little bit, and we'll come back to this in a second. Now that you're in your new window, the first thing that you want to do is to just start closing out of all of the inventory and interface screens that you can. So I'm just going to quickly close out of what I have open, and I can just open these up in the future. I'm going to move everything out of the way. My map is going to go all the way in that top right hand corner of the screen, but it's going to need to be very small. So try to make this as small as you can and then move it over into that space. Again, I talked about the compromises you have to make if you have additional action bars enabled, and I'm willing to make the compromise for this since I use this UI all the time. So I'm going to be taking up a pretty big chunk of my screen to my 3 additional action bars, which is a little bit unfortunate. You can skip this section if you don't want to do this, but I tend to use this even for combat, so having access to these 3 bars is really useful for me. You just want to have them take up the top left-hand corner of your screen. Then you want to drag your combat bar and put it in the center of this small window that you have. When you get here, you're going to need to do a lot more customization to get this to be perfect. Right now, you're going to want to extend your bar so that way it matches your ability bars at the top, and your chat window is going to be flush with that, and it's going to take a little bit of work to get that perfect, but when you do, you'll know because there'll be nothing extruding out to the side, and right now mine isn't, so I'm going to just back it up a little bit, and then I'm going to have to move my action bar over to the left. We're going to be coming back to that, but right now we can move over our Slayer counter and our clock. We will be using that in this layout, especially since I do Slayer in this. We want to shrink our ribbon bar as small as possible and then move that over to the side since we won't be using this too much. And if we do need to use it, we can use the drop-down menu at any time. From here, we need to open up our backpack and our equipment window. And first, we're going to just set up our backpack to be a little bit bigger than it is right now. We want to be able to get to the point where we have 4 columns. So you just need to drag this up until you do see that you have 4 columns. We also want to pop out our worn equipment window and put that in the space between our inventory and the minimap. It doesn't really matter if this has a scroll bar since you won't really be using the options in this window that often. It's going to take a little bit of work to get this in there, but you'll know that you do once it can fill up the gap between your inventory and the map. Then you're going to make it as small as possible again, but still being able to see all 4 items like you can see on my screen, and then you can match the space of that to the map at the top. This is where the trial and error comes in. You can see right now I don't have 4 columns, especially when I lock it. So what I'm going to need to do is extend my application window just a little bit, and then we're going to check to see if I can make the 4 columns happen. And I think that I can, but now it's going to mess up the left side of my screen, so I'm going to need to change that. But right now I have a scroll bar with 4 columns, which is perfect for the backpack. So just match it with the equipment window and make sure it's flush with the minimap. Then let's fix the left side of the screen. This is going to be a little bit more work. If you make all of these micro adjustments and you still can't get everything to be perfect, that means you need to drag the window out just a little bit more. So do that and then try again. And at this point, you should be pretty much to the point where you can get everything to be matched up perfectly. Right now I just need to shrink this window a little bit, and then I'll be able to get everything to fill out the spots flush with no extrusions. In this particular example, I was able to get the backpack to take up a full space without having a scroll bar, and I've never been able to do that before, and I like the way it looks, so I'm going to keep that. Right now, we're going to need to move our minimap out of the way because we're going to go to Edit Layout Mode and change our game view. You can turn off all of this extra stuff. We're going to customize this in a second. Now, the object of the game view is to make it take up the center of the screen, because if it takes up the whole screen, it's going to be blocking too much of the actual things that it can show. So it won't be able to take up the entire space. It'll overlap a little bit, but that's perfectly fine. We want to make sure that the whole thing that the game view is showing is things that we could interact with if we wanted to. Once you've got that set up, move your map over back into that corner, and then we're going to just go through and customize everything to make sure it is exactly as functional as possible. Now, the one thing that I will tell you is the GE is broken if you use this layout, but when I'm using this layout, I'm not really doing anything on the GE, so it doesn't really bother me. Any large interface might have a little bit of clipping, and you'd need to extend the window a little bit to be able to interact with them, but that is a compromise that I'm willing to make to be able to have a UI that can fit up 25% of my screen. Just make sure everything else is centered, and you should be good to go. Make sure your buff and debuff bars are in the right place. Make sure all of your extra inventory screens and interfaces are all set up correctly, and then make sure your game dialog isn't blocked by anything. Then when you're done, click Save and Exit, then save again, then go into your Edit Layout mode and save this as Custom 3. And now you have a fully functional UI with one minor adjustment that we need to make. Go back into the settings. You can see right here, any large inventory or interface screen is going to be a little bit corrupted, but this doesn't really matter for this section. Just going to go over to General. Then we're going to go into UI customization, and we're going to set the transparency all the way back to full, so that way we don't see that the game view isn't taking up the full screen. Now, if I go into combat, you can see that you can fully use this for anything that you want. And I primarily use this if I'm going to be AFKing any type of skills or combat that isn't too demanding. And I primarily am using this for doing things like Prif Elf thieving, which works perfectly with this small UI. And just one last look at what it looks like on the full display without being zoomed in. You can see that you can see everything and it's still very functional. Anyways, I hope this did help you customize your own UI or gave you some pointers on making your own UI customizations. If it did, remember to leave a like and a comment below, and I will catch you next time.